Hi, I'm Alma Kulén from the University of Oslo. The paper Growing Up in a Complex World, Engaging Children in Socio-Cultural Matters Through Speculative Installations, presented in this video, was written in collaboration with Katie Coughlin from Oslo Children's Museum. In the paper, we reflect on how to support children's engagement with current socio-cultural and planetary challenges. Our agenda is simple. We first describe the motivation for the work, then the background, and then the framework, and then we discuss and describe the contributions. We were motivated by the belief that problems that the world is facing call for urgent thinking about what futures we do desire. As Maturana said in his paper on meta-design, the question that we human beings must face is that of what do we want to happen to us, not a question of knowledge or progress. We believe that the children have place in such conversations, and of course, these conversations need to be at the appropriate level. There are many perceived challenges to having such discussions with young children. First, parents naturally want to protect them from anything difficult, and protecting them is important, but overprotection might be damaging, as found, for example, by Michael Unger in his work on overprotective parenting. Furthermore, Timothy Morton, the author of the book Ecological Thought, finds that one of the things that modern society has damaged, along with ecosystems and species and the global climate, is thinking. Moreover, if one heeds the children's developmental stages, one needs to wait until about the age of 9, where the ability to think critically is commonly present. However, research shows that precursors to critical thinking can and should be developed from an early age as low as the age of 3. In the context of interaction design, teaching and research, we started collaboration with Children's Museum in 2007. In the beginning, we focused on participatory design, which gradually opened to student teams to engage with topics they themselves found interesting and to explore them through research through design. This very short video shows the context for the Design the City Kids event and how chaotic it can be. Considering the value and attitudes of Oslo Children's Museum, we utilized the technique of making an activity board and annotating it. On this slide, then you can see that the Children's Museum cares about being relevant, about participation. It's focused on children and their voices, on the collaborative play, discovery, and important for me, digital experiences, making and interacting with technology. Thus, the question that we got interested a few years back was, how can we use our many years of collaboration to leverage more serious topic through interaction design course and students prototyping for Oslo families? A very short background. We approached the mentioned question through research through design, and borrowing from Zimmerman and Forliz's framing of research through design as the field, the lab, and the showroom, we can say that the students chose the showroom often, meaning that they use speculative and critical design, while we use the field approach, meaning that we observed interactions with installations and interactions among visitors. When it comes to installations and children, there is a lot of previous work to mention. Some focused on value-based design, other on mitigating different divides, other on household energy with children, for example, or other more serious and larger topics that until recently were not typical for interaction design. Let me now explain how we arrived at the framework presented in the paper. Starting with aesthetic accountability, where according to Gaber, aesthetics refers to how satisfactory the combination of multiple design features is, as opposed to how beautiful something might be, we define aesthetic accountability within our context to be co-constituted by interactions with technology, interactions with others, and nuances in thinking and behaviors among children. Since the themes that we wanted to engage with were large and sometimes quite serious, we started thinking that we needed to gauge the mood that the exhibits might generate. So we started working with mood boards, like the two shown on the slide. On the left, the one related to the refugee crisis, and on the right, to the loss of biodiversity. The refugee theme is clearly more difficult for children, thus darker than the loss of biodiversity. This gave us the idea to consider the darkness scale, working on a continuum between the dark and the light. The refugee theme thus might be darker than the loss of the biodiversity, For children also because saving bees and cacao plants and animals is something that children can easily relate to. A total of 9 projects with serious topics were conducted, and 5 became installations at the City Kids events. Jointly, they contributed to shaping of the framework. Other work asked questions such as, can games inspire civic activation? What issues could engage you in public debate and how? What do you know about climate change? What do you do to live a sustainable life? What inspired you as a child? What can you imagine with technology and so on? Let me now show you 2 short clips from 2 installations, Eco Agents and Little Bits. The activities at installations were then subsequently annotated, and all sorts of remarks concerning relevant points for the installation were noted on each board. Going to Emigrate to Axelia installation, described in the paper, we can say that it had a rather complex scenario, providing some interesting points to speculate on. For example, the machine scans your fingertips and it can determine if your DNA is good enough to emigrate to Axelia. This opens for possibility that some family members could travel and others not. That would be one area to think about critically, and another would be, can machines really have the power to make such decisions for us? Another interesting topic is, if one is rejected, what can one do? At the bottom here, this is me dressed in burqa, and I served as a facilitator at this installation. The facilitator has an opportunity to adjust criticality or the level of speculation to the age of children present in the room at the time. The noise installation, on the other hand, explored the experiences with urban and construction noises. The children could activate sound sources by touch, collaborate with others to compose or decompose sounds. They also needed to try to recognize them, which wasn't always easy. This was conceptualized as a minimum interaction. However, for children to better engage with noise pollution as a speculative topic, better facilitation and speculative pointers were needed, as were the links to the future. For example, with this noise, I could get a headache really, and it might last, so it's not good for health. Thus, the framework that we arrived at consisted of 4 components: darkness scale, speculative pointers, linking the present and the future, and scaffolding the engagement. In terms of discussion, the considerations that shaped the framework were that different types of interactions and limitations have an influence on critical and speculative reasoning. Engagement through quizzes is okay in some situations, but for developing critical thinking, it's better with more open dilemmas, paradoxes, or contradictions. Peer-to-peer support is great, but involvement of adults is also very important. Design for individual engagement in public spaces of this kind is not optimal, using mobile phones, for example. The age-appropriate differences needed to be supported through design by making multiple scenarios that were age-appropriate. We discussed the framework in the paper in detail, using the 2 installations, Emigrate to Axelia and Noise, to explain it. I hope that you'll find it to be rich and informative, but I will not discuss it here because there is simply no time. Closing, I agree with John Lowe, who said that if the world is complex and messy, then at least some of the time we're going to have to give up on simplicities. And lastly, I want to mention the contributions of this work. The first and the main contribution is the framework itself. The second is the opportunity for interaction design for children to use cultural institutions that serve the children to engage them in more serious dialogues through speculative installations. And last, the one that requires more looking into is this conversational space between parents and children that is related to serious topic, that we think that it has a bit of different quality, but we still haven't quite captured this yet. That would be all. Thank you. And if there are any questions, please contact me at almira@ifi.uio.no. Thank you very much for your attention.